Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second Brexit webinar of the week. Thank you all very much for taking the time to join us. We have a lot of attendees coming in. I think we had about 300 signed up for this, which shows what an important subject it is. And people are making their way into the webinar as I speak. We have, of course, I think the slides are just coming up from Nick. Thank you very much. Why are we doing this now? We have 37 days until the end of the Brexit transition period. So we are very keen to make sure that our members and their suppliers are fully briefed and fully aware of the changes that are going to be brought in and what this means for your business, whether, whichever side of the UK border you happen to sit. For those of you who don't know me, my name's David Hopkins. I'm the Chief Executive of the Timber Trade Federation. We're going to be joined today by a number of guests to give updates on different aspects of timber supply and timber import and export. With each of the speakers that comes on, I'm going to unmute them, ask them to give their presentations, and we will be taking questions, a few questions for each speaker at the end of their presentation, and then we can start a wider group discussion at the end of this whole session. We've got speakers looking at all different forms of the regulation. We've got John Dye from the UK Timber Pallet and Packaging Federation, TIMCON, to give an update on what this means in terms of timber pallets and packaging, the materials you actually transport your timber on. We have an update from the UK Competent Authority about the changes to timber regulation. And we have a business perspective from two European companies, one on Swedish wood, Mathias Fridholm, and Mark Probert, who's the UK director of Binderholz, big Austrian sawmiller, as I'm sure most of you know. The changes that are coming in are things that we have been talking about for a long time in the TTF. It's obviously important for us. About 90% of our UK trade is with or within Europe. Our position has been clear. We didn't want to take sides on whether there should be, whether we leave, remain. We've accepted what the result was, but our position is that we have been advocating clearly and consistently to demand a full trade deal with the EU. In 2016, when the referendum was first put out, this is what everybody said was going to happen. We would get a trade deal, and this would minimize friction for businesses across borders. We want to make sure that we hold the government to that, to minimize those EU border controls and all of the non-tariff barriers, particularly in maximizing common standards, mutual recognition of standards across borders and between countries. We've encouraged our members to write to their MPs, showing that no deal would very negatively impact the businesses within their constituency. And very, very clearly, right from the start, we have wanted to equalize the VAT processes between EU and non-EU imports. That's been the whole question of VAT and how it is accounted for has been a big talking point in the UK amongst our membership, amongst other business sectors, amongst other importing and exporting businesses. And we've seen the government go back and forth on that subject. One thing we can say with some confidence, we believe, and this is certainly the feedback we get from our members, that TTF members are ready for Brexit. For those areas of trade that they can control, those areas of business process and business practice that are within the control of our members' businesses, they are ready. We think that there will be minimal disruption directly from the changes that are coming, partly because there are significant volumes of wood and wood products produced and processed in the UK. There are minimal volumes, and I realise that when we say that, it can sound bad for those businesses which are reliant on ro-ro ports and road deliveries via Dover, the Dover-Calais border, but they are a smallish part of the overall timber portfolio within the UK. The main volumes of timber are arriving on dedicated vessels around a range of different ports around the UK. And we had a presentation yesterday from the head of communications at Associated British Ports showing the different volumes arriving at different ports throughout the country and the changes and the investments that they're making there to prepare for these changes. There are also very few wood products requiring the just-in-time management of supply chains or the specialist sort of cold storage that other supply chains such as food or pharmaceuticals may need. So we are confident that our members are ready for this, but only within those processes and practices that they can control. There are likely, and the news this week confirms it, there are likely to be a lot of indirect effects on us, such as the availability of heavy goods vehicles for UK transport, long queues, delays at the border, and so on. But if these do come to pass, I think wood supply is likely to be the least of the UK problems. I do also think that it is worth, and we've reiterated this with our members time and time again, it is worth you and your business knowing as much as you can about these changes in advance, because it is quite likely that the authorities in the UK, and by that I mean the customs, the port authorities, the plant health operatives, and so on, the rules and regulations will be new to them as well. When the rules and regulations are new to the authorities and they're new to businesses, the chance of getting problems, mistakes, cock-ups is doubled. So I would really stress, as we have done in all of the meetings that we've had this year and previously, please make sure you're on top of all of these subjects. So with that in mind, just the final bit of housekeeping that I would like to draw everybody's attention to is that you will notice that because we have so many people on this call, we have had to mute the audience. However, if there are questions you would like to raise during each one of the speakers' presentations or at any point during this, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And you should be able to see it round about the middle there. Please use that Q&A function, and I will try and pick up those questions at the end of each speaker and at the end of the group Q&A session right at the end. So without further ado, I would like to hand over and pass you to my colleague, Mr. Nick Boulton, Head of Technical and Trade Issues for the TTF, to run you through some of the changes that are likely to be happening from December the 31st. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I think you can all hear me now, hopefully. Just to be clear, deal or no deal, from the 1st of January 2021, the UK will reach the end of the transition period and the UK will formally leave the EU. This means that there will be a new international border. The UK will leave the EU Customs Union and it will leave the single market. What are the implications of that? Well, failure to meet new rules in terms of the customs border will potentially mean delays for goods or possibly even non-entry of goods. Border controls will be in place, customs processes will be in place, there'll be potential duty and new VAT processes. There will also be new requirements for plant health and ISPM 15 for wood packaging material. When the UK leaves the single market, Failure to meet the new rules for our market will potentially not delay the goods, but it may mean that the goods are not valid either on the UK or the EU market. And the two most important pieces of legislation regarding the single market are the Construction Products Regulation and the timber and the new UK timber regulation. Since the single market was created in 1992, there has been no formal customs border between the UK and the EU. So for almost 30 years, movement of goods has been very easy, requiring obviously the keeping of records, but no formal customs procedures at the border. From the 1st of January next year, 2021, an international border will be put in place, formally separating the UK from the EU Customs Union and EU single market. Just to quickly touch on Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Protocol has been developed, which gives special status and means that Northern Ireland will be, in practical terms, remaining part of the EU. This means that we need to identify goods that are moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland in order to avoid duty being paid. But we also need to identify goods that are moving through Northern Ireland and into Ireland so that the correct duty will be paid where it's appropriate. Northern Ireland businesses or businesses that are trading with Northern Ireland need to register with the new Northern Ireland Trader Support Services. This is very important as this new government service will be assisting with customs entry and transfer of goods between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. CE marking will remain the predominant mark for the Northern Ireland market, whilst the Northern Ireland Protocol is in place. So as we've said for the last 10 years or nearly 30 years now, very easy access and few controls. But from the 1st of January, we will see the basic border controls being put in place. Logistically, it's quite difficult to put all the controls in place at the same time. So the government has staggered implementation from the 1st of January to the 30th of June, meaning that different elements of the controls, the border controls, are being put in place over that 6 months period. But by the 1st of July, all controls should be fully in place. What are the new border controls? Well, the details are available in the UK Border Operating Procedure, which has been published by the UK government in June of this year. So that provides a lot of the detail that's available. In terms of arrivals of vessels, it's probably not significantly different because vessels work on international controls most of the time anyway. However, for vehicle transport, for lorry transport, the controls are going to be very different. Some of that information is already available on the UK government website. There is also due to be a driver's handbook to be developed by the government, but that is still under development and is not due until December. So for the new international border, who is going to be responsible for customs procedures? Well, fundamentally, it is going to be the UK importer. But in terms of contracts, if you look at Incoterms, customs procedures, in most cases, rest with the buyer. It's only for very specific delivered terms would the seller in any way be responsible for import procedures. But it's important to say, even in those circumstances, the supplier is not the importer. Just because they carry out the import procedures, they do so on behalf of the buyer. So just because the seller may undertake the procedures, it doesn't make them necessarily the importer and the responsibilities that go with it. So given that the buyer is responsible in most cases, it's really important that they're providing the supplier with all the information that they need to be identified at the border. So that would be the buyer's EORI number, UK VAT number, to appear on documents that are coming through. The seller will be responsible for the export declaration, or where goods are coming on vessel, the entry to the port exit system at port of departure. There will be a requirement on the UK buyer to make an import declaration, and when the goods arrive, there will be hopefully an automatic system to inform HMRC that the goods have arrived in the UK. Import VAT and any duty required must be paid at point of entry or deferred. I'll come on to that, the VAT aspect, in a little while. So who will undertake the customs procedures? Well, my main message would be it's really important that buyers and sellers communicate about how these processes are going to be put in place. As I said, the buyer is in most cases responsible, but it's important to decide exactly how it's going to be done and transmit that information to the supplier. So the customs procedures could be undertaken in-house by the importer, or it could use a third party such as a forwarding agent or other bodies such as that. Before the customs entry can be undertaken, it's important to correctly classify and value the products that are being purchased from the EU, because those are the two things that will impact the duty that may be paid. We've got more information on these aspects on the TTF resources on the website. So in terms of duty, what's the situation? Well, by this point in time, I really hoped I could say to you that we'd have a definite position. However, the negotiations between the EU and the UK are still very much underway. And until they're completed, we don't have any idea about whether duty is going to be applicable on EU goods or not. However, what we do know is that from the 1st of January 2021, the UK will use the new UK global tariff duty rates for trading with all countries. So we know these will be in place. The only circumstances under which they won't apply would be where the UK has a specific trade agreement. So if the UK has a specific trade agreement with the EU, then those rates within that agreement will apply. Equally, if the UK has a bilateral trade agreement with a country like Chile, for instance, then those rates will apply rather than the new UK global tariff rates. The other circumstances in which the global tariff rates may not apply would be if the country has GSP status, so they're a developing country, but there's very few wood products that are now applicable under that system. The other alternative is if there is a tariff quota in place, and the only one of those in the timber sector really is the coniferous plywood quota. So for most wood products under the global tariff, most wood products will remain duty-free. So of the 200 codes that appear in Chapter 44 of the Customs Tariff, 154 remain duty-free. So most of our products are duty-free and will remain so. For the other 46 products out of the 200, the UK global tariff rates will apply. Just looking at some examples for both of those situations, of the 152 products that are duty-free would include all of these different categories. Most important, obviously, are the codes starting 4407, where the majority of coniferous material, either sawn or planed, is declared. So the main volume would be within that 4407 section, and both of those are duty-free, along with mouldings and a variety of other products. Oh, sorry, going in the wrong direction. The only products on which duty will apply, as it does now, would be within the wood-based panels section. So currently, if you import wood-based panels from outside of the EU, you will be paying 7% duty or 10%. Under the UK global tariff, that will be reduced to 6% or 10%. The structure of those duty rates is almost exactly the same as the situation now. So if you're currently paying 7% on your imports, you're going to pay 6%. There's lots of information on the UK government website and on the TTF website, and you can search for individual product codes to find out what the duty rates are going to be. Just in terms of customs codes or commodity codes, one element that we're not quite sure of at the moment is whether we're going to use 8-digit codes or 10-digit codes. This is a fairly academic point to most people, but the reality is that when you're trading within Europe using Intrastat, you only need 8-digit codes, whereas if you're trading internationally, up until this point in time, the UK government customs system, which is called CHIEF, has required a 10-digit customs code. So our understanding is that the new UK global tariff will be 8 digits in most cases, but could be 10 where necessary. So not quite clear how many digits we're going to be using. But for the timber sector, it's not that important because in most cases, the last 2 digits will be 00 anyway. Okay, so moving on to plant health. The fundamental changes that are going to come into place will be that if your product is a controlled wood, then you must provide phytosanitary certificates instead of plant passports. You will also need to pre-notify the goods of arrival to the Forestry Commission Plant Health Service, and you will need to send the goods to an address which is as a registered forestry premises. So for controlled wood, those 3 new things all apply. So we're moving from plant passports, which are a less formal document which is included as part of the standard documentation, to separate phytosanitary certificates which the supplier needs to obtain in the country of origin to confirm that the goods will meet the UK landing requirements. So what materials are going to be caught up in these new plant health regulations? Well, for softwood traders, the main controls are on coniferous wood with bark, as they are now. So at the moment, if you are doing movements of coniferous wood with bark, you will need to have a plant passport. As of the 1st of Jan, those goods will need to have a phytosanitary certificate. Processed coniferous wood, so that has been fully debarked, except if it comes from Spain, Portugal or Spain, where the pinewood nematode is present. So debarked goods can travel unheeded and won't need documentation. The biggest change is with hardwood traders, and they'll see the most significant change with new requirements for EU species such as beech, birch and ash, but excluding oak. Now, these species, when they come from particular European countries, and you need to check the legislation to make sure exactly which countries are affected, but these new measures are being put in place to protect UK forests against Asian longhorn beetle and other pests. So the countries involved are where we have already seen outbreaks of Asian longhorn beetle and certain other pests. Wood-based panel traders are really not going to be caught up in terms of plant health because the processing that's required to produce wood-based panels would normally create sufficient heat and pressure to destroy any potential vectors. Just to say that John Dye is going to be speaking in a few minutes, so he'll cover the ISPM 15 situation. Looking at VAT, While we've been trading within Europe using Intrastat, then UK companies have been able to deal with VAT on their VAT returns. So there hasn't needed to be a separate system, whereas goods coming from outside of the EU, VAT has been applied at point of arrival, and UK companies had to pay the VAT up front and then reclaim it later. So there was a system for reclaiming VAT, but it did mean that it had an impact on the company's cash flow. So rather than the UK moving to the international system that we've used for many years, the UK has taken the decision that it's going to move to the European system. So all imports, regardless of where they come from, you will now be able to make the VAT return. You will now be able to cover on your quarterly VAT return. There have been some rumours going around that overseas suppliers need to register for UK VAT and add UK VAT to their invoices. This is not the case. So if you're being told that, please let me know and I'll point you towards the correct information. UK import VAT will be added at the point of customs declaration. So when the goods arrived in the UK, UK import VAT will be added to the customer's VAT account, and the buyer in the UK will then be able to declare that, will then be able to deal with that via their quarterly VAT return. This is why EORI and VAT numbers for the importer are essential to appear on import paperwork. So moving on then from the customs border to the single market, the UK is leaving the EU single market, and for the wood sector, probably the two most important bits of single market legislation are the UK construction products regulations and the UK timber regulation. Adrian and Deanne will be up shortly to talk about the UK timber regulation, so I won't talk anything about that. But I will provide some information on the construction products regulation. The most important point is that for next year, for 2021, both CE or UK CA will be acceptable on the UK market as the conformance mark. So for the whole of next year, both CE marking and the new UK CA mark will be acceptable. However, a really important point is that UK notified bodies will lose their CE marking status on the 31st of December this year. So that means that companies are being overseen by UK notified bodies must make a change by the end of the year. Now, the UK notified bodies have told us that they've been in touch with all of their clients and they've offered them two options. Either you can switch to a European notified body, and all of the UK bodies have got sister companies which are based in the EU, so you can switch over to that and carry on CE marking. Alternatively, you can stay with your UK notified body and start UK CA marking from the 1st of January. So from the 1st of January to the 31st of December next year, 2021, both CE and UK CA marks will be valid on the UK market. And you can apply both of the marks to a single product if you wish to do so, but you will need two separate registrations currently in order to do that. So you can apply both marks to a product, but you need to be registered once for CE marking using a European notified body, once for UK CA marking using the UK notified body. We very much hope that during next year there will be new systems of mutual recognition put in place, which will mean that you won't have to have two separate bodies to place the two marks. But we'll keep people informed as the situation goes on. But at the moment, there is no such system in place. The UK government has also very clearly said that from the end of next year, so from the 1st of January 2022, only the UK CO mark will be valid on the UK market to show compliance. The CE mark will be able to appear on products alongside the UK CA mark, but it won't be taken as a compliance mark. So just looking at the various options that are available, the most important is obviously the CE mark. So that remains a valid method of indicating conformity for the whole of next year. Sorry, I should have indicated in this table, the market is on the left-hand side and the conformity mark is across the top. So looking at the first column under the CE mark, it will be valid for goods placed on the Great Britain market, on the GB market, until the end of next year. And it can be carried on the product thereafter, but only alongside the UK CA mark. So moving down the first column, for the Northern Ireland market, CE is the acceptable mark for indicating conformity. And on the EU market, obviously, the CE mark is the sole acceptable mark for indicating conformity. Moving to the second column, the new UK CA mark. So this becomes a valid method of indicating conformity from the 1st of January next year. And the UK government is telling us that it will be the sole acceptable mark in our sector from the 1st of January 2022. The UK CA mark will not be suitable for indicating conformity in Northern Ireland, but it can appear on the mark alongside the specialist NI mark, which I'll come to in a minute. The UK CA mark is also not suitable for indicating conformity in Europe, but it can be carried on the product as the UK is no longer a member state. So therefore it's not considered, or it should not be considered to be a conflicting mark. There's been lots of conversation about the third column, which is the UK NI mark. Companies really only have to worry about this if they are based and undertaking manufacturing within the UK and want to send goods just to Northern Ireland. If anybody's in that position, can I suggest you contact me directly and I'll talk you through the options. I think talking through the options in a workshop like this will just cause more confusion. So what should we be doing right now? Well, if you haven't already done so, you really need to be looking at the EU exit resources that we've got on the TTF website in the Brexit Hub. You can also look at the government website, but they are much more general information, so not targeted specifically at the timber industry, whereas the TTF information, we've tried to distill out what's important to the timber sector. For UK companies, I would also encourage you to look at the courses that are available on the UK Customs Academy. You can apply grants to get your staff trained via these courses. And I think for anybody that's involved in the import process, it would be really useful to have some of your members of staff trained in that way. As I said previously, you need to identify the commodity codes and the potential duty for your products. And most important of the lot, I think, will be to communicate along the supply chain, looking at who's going to be responsible for what and what the disruptive changes might be. And if you're dealing with Northern Ireland, sending goods there from Great Britain, then you need, or from Northern Ireland back to Great Britain, then you need to register with the NI Trader Support Service. That is really important, and the sooner you do that, the better. Just to look at the recent actions that the TTF have been doing. So we've published our TTF Brexit Guide, which is probably the shortest piece of information that you'll find on the subject of Brexit. This is free to all members and all of our suppliers, and you can find copies of this on the TTF website. We've got obviously the online events this week, and as well as that, we're encouraging all members to visit the Brexit Hub and download the information from there. Okay, I think that's all for today. Handing back to David.
Thank you very much, Nick. Just one point of clarity there. As Nick said, the TTF Brexit guide may be the shortest Brexit guide, but it is the best. So I would recommend that everybody visits the TTF website and downloads that guide. I think that it's important to stress that we have written our documents really from the point of view of timber importers, but nevertheless, there is a lot of information in there which will be very valuable for timber suppliers, timber exporters from the EU. So please do download that. Nick, there's a couple of questions that have come in whilst you were speaking that I'm just going to pick up on. The first two are just a point of clarity. First, and a couple of people have asked this on email as well, just to be absolutely clear, sawn wood stocks from Sweden and Finland, and in fact elsewhere in Europe, will not incur duties.
That's correct. So sawn wood products are duty free, as are planed products and as are end jointed material. So finger jointed material is also duty free.
Excellent. Okay. And then
that applies to coniferous and to deciduous hardwoods as well.
Yep. So any sawn wood stocks. And then just on the CE marking and UK CA marking, I think this is an area we're going to have to do a lot more work with both suppliers and members, just to make sure that people are understanding. You will need a UK CA mark if you're going to be selling into the UK after the end of January after the end of 2021.
That's correct.
So from January 22 onwards, you will need a UK CA mark. But one of the questions that has come up, the actual criteria, the product standards themselves, although they will have a different label on, for the time being, the UK CA mark, the criteria which lie behind that, the product standards, are the same as those in the CE marking regime.
Yeah, that's correct. So from the 1st of January next year, 2021, the UK will take the existing EN harmonised standard, so the harmonised standard for whichever product group, and will make that the UK designated standard. So as of the 1st of January next year, both sets of requirements will be identical. And we very much intend that they should remain identical into the future. There's really no pressing need in our sector to make any changes to the UK standards. So therefore, we'd like to keep them in line with the European standards for as long as physically possible.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we certainly will be doing a lot of work on this subject as the TTF during the course of next year. Unfortunately, the government has made it very clear that they don't really want to hear from anyone at all until they have a deal or not. And then I believe that there will be probably a number of areas which possibly haven't been thought through that clearly, which industry will be lobbying on. So I am expecting that we will still be busy on a lot of these subjects during the coming years. One more question. I think Northern Ireland is another grey area for many people. So from deliveries, if you're supplying from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, question here, do we need to register for our own XI prefix, or can our freight forwarder use their own XI prefix on our behalf?
That's why you need to register with the Northern Ireland Trader Service. They should be able to provide answers to those questions. The UK has published the UK Border Operating Procedure, which covers imports into Great Britain, but there isn't yet a separate operating procedure for Northern Ireland. So we don't have the same level of detail for Northern Ireland. And my understanding is that that's what the Northern Ireland Trader Service is there to do, to provide answers to those kind of questions. So that's why you need to register with them as soon as possible and ask them those sort of questions.
Okay, no, thanks very much. We've got a couple of more questions about marks, the UKCA mark and CE marking. What I'm going to do, we will answer one here now. Can a UKCA mark, and you did answer this, I think, UKCA mark, it has to be issued by a UK approved body, not by an EU notified body?
Currently, it can only be done by a UK notified body. So, and even then, they can't authorise it until the 1st of January next year. So the UK CA marking system only starts on the 1st of January. So from that point, it has to be a UK approved body. But what the process is for getting new UK approved bodies or getting mutual recognition of European bodies, there is no information about that at the present time.
No, I think that's going to be something that there'll be a lot of debate and possibly some movement on during the course of next year. We're going to pick up some of the other ones about how sawmills actually practically go around that and things during the talks with some of our other speakers. In the meantime, Nick, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, and I notice there's quite a lot of questions on the list. So what I'll try and do is, while the other presentations are going on, I'll try and answer some of them by text where I can.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've heard there from Nick covering most of the areas of business that will be impacted from which are within the business practices and business operations of our members and their suppliers already. We would like to now turn to one of the most essential parts of moving any goods around the world, and that of pallets and packaging. So I'd like to welcome John Dye from the UK Timber Pallet and Packaging Federation, the president, in fact, of TIMCON in the UK. And I'd like to ask John, yes, if you can share your screen and put the slides up. And John, please take it away and explain how this is going to impact upon the pallet and packaging sector, which is a big sector for the timber supply chain.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. Yeah, not only a big sector for the supply chains, etc. It's also been a bit of an eye-opener, I believe, for the government and DEFRA and also Europeans on how important the humble pallet is to everybody in their daily lives. Just to move on, just to start off, just to give an introduction on who TIMCON is. The association represents probably circa about 80% of all the UK new pallet manufacture and packing case manufacture. Something we're very proud of is that we're the only national association that all the major pooling companies, and that's your SHEP, LPR, pooling partners and EPAL, we're the only national association that they are currently members of. They're members of the European Association, FEFBEB, but not of any other national associations, and there's something we're very, very proud of. We also have the affiliates, the UK and Irish sawmills. All the major mills are affiliate members of the association. And something that's grown in the last few years, we're now seeing our membership from overseas, including EU. We've now got members from Netherlands, Germany, Lithuania and Latvia. And it's great to see that these people think it's worthwhile to join the UK association. An idea on the scale in the UK, the new pallets manufactured last year, 45 million. Pallet repairs is now going up to over 48 million, which is really, really something we're very, very proud of, very pleased to see, because obviously we're promoting reuse very, very much because of all the environmental benefits, etc. And the total turnover for the industry to the UK is about 450 million pounds. So that was TIMCON. Now we talk about ISPM 15, and everyone talks about ISPM 15. And I thought maybe just as well go back a little bit and just explain how it's evolved in the UK and Europe. Obviously, it was introduced to reduce the risk of spreading pests in the forests, into all the forests with the wood boring longhorn beetle, etc., and pinewood nematode which is probably the key one that we have come across in recent years. In 2002, the international standard ISPM 15 was introduced. The UK, most of the UK's trading partners now around the globe have implemented landing regulations for this. I think it's key to state that the international standard was published, but every country kept its sovereign rights to plant health. I was in the UK, has done that with the plant health, and EU with their plant health regulations. I think key for the UK was we realised very quickly and very early on, through working with the Forestry Commission at the time, it was Roddy Burgess, who headed up the plant health in Forestry Commission in Edinburgh. And he got very much involved with TIMCON, my counterpart, president at the time, Graham Nicklin. They got very early realised that this was a key development for the industry. And they worked very hard to put together what we now call the UKWP MMP, which is the UK Wood Packaging Materials Marking Programme. I wish we'd managed to get something a little bit shorter, but very, very important. And TIMCON led the way with the Forestry Commission on that. What is ISPM 15? How do we do it? If you look at the kiln, we stick the pallets in the kiln, and we put them in there, and then we leave them in there until they get to a temperature of 56 degrees, and leave them at core and leave them there for 30 minutes, and then we can take them out, and then we can put the famous mark that's below the picture of the kiln there, which has the IPPC feather, as they call it, on the left-hand side, the GB for the country, and then you have get your relevant license number. And that's the global marking, slight variations, obviously for the countries, but all the relevant information is there. We had 2002, as I said, we had the discussions with the Forestry Commission putting together the marking scheme. And then it was decided that we're going to give this statutory status. It was felt by the associations that it really needed to become legislation, give it some teeth, etc. And so we were delighted when in November 2006 it came into force. It's now overseen and chaired by obviously the Forestry Commission, but we have the Advisory Council, and that consists of not only the UK, Ireland, TIMCON, NEPD, who are the reconditioned pallet handlers, CONFOR, the sawmillers are represented there, and the pest control bodies as well. So that's really where ISPM 15 started from. What's Brexit? What's the implications for Brexit for us all? Well, clearly, as the statement says here, from the 1st of January 2021, it's a legal requirement for wood packaging material moving in both directions between UK and EU to be compliant and marked as ISPM 15. And the key thing there is both ways and the 1st of January. I think it's quite relevant, important to get across. We've heard of late that there's a 6-month leeway, easement, etc. That is not the case. We've been told this by DEFRA, the Forestry Commission, 1st of January 2021 is the deadline. From the beginning, the industry, and when I say the industry, that's not just the UK industry, that's the whole of the European industry, the UK industry. We've made it very clear that we're definitely not opposed to ISPM 15 compliance, and why should we? You know, we need the raw materials, we need the forests, so why would we look to have these forests at risk because of the pests? Absolutely we wouldn't. So we've been very, very supportive on this. But obviously the concern has been the timing and the capacity. What really compounds this and has caused frustration for us all is the fact that, you know, there is no scientific reason or evidence to show that come the 1st of January, the pests have been sitting back waiting for 1st of January and they're all going to go out and attack and cause havoc. Nothing's changed. It's the same materials that are being used. It's the same manufacturers. It's the same sawmills, etc. So this is where we've had a bit of frustration. Because during the time that there's been ISPM 15 has been introduced, we've had no problems, reported problems, apart from possibly Portugal was a problem, but that was an isolated case, and there was definite reasons why that had happened, and really no point going into that, but it wasn't the norm. Again, the other thing that I should say on this with the I should have said at the beginning, was when ISPM 15 came out, it was put to handle goods going across borders. They put in place, the EU argued at the time that the EU was one country, and obviously UK at that time, we were happily in the EU, and we were part of that. And there was an EU exemption granted, and hence why we've not had to build up stocks of ISPM 15 pallets since 2002. That has obviously caused a lot of the problems for us. As you can see on the right there, we reckon, and this is a very rough guess, that we reckon there's between 60 and 100 million pallet trips per annum between the UK and Europe. It is very much a calculated estimate, because as there's been no reason to heat treat the pallets, no one really has been asking the question whether, you know, our customers have been shipping to Europe, or likewise European users shipping to the UK. So we didn't have accurate numbers, but working together, we have come up with these numbers, which have been accepted by the whole of the working group that was put in place. We were very fortunate right from the start, that the work that we've done with DEFRA was recognised by the Right Honourable Michael Gove, and we were shown as being an excellent example of good practice. And he added that he wished that other policy areas could adapt similar pragmatic approaches. And I think the key word to pick up on there is pragmatic. We have never said at any time, we've never been anti, saying this is ridiculous, we can't do it, it can't be achieved. We've just worked with the DEFRA, plant health people, explaining we saw that there was areas for concern, capacity, etc. And we've been supportive and working together on that. And I would say that's always been the same across in Europe as well. In UK, and again, a lot of what we've done here has been reciprocated by pallet manufacturers in the rest of Europe. In the UK, we formed a working group in December 2017 that was led by DEFRA, and on the working group where the major pallet pools had representatives there, because the vast majority of goods come backwards and forwards are on pallet pool pallets, coloured pallets. And the Second-Hand Reconditioned Association was represented on that, and clearly TIMCON members were there as well. The outcome of all the work that we put together and the numerous meetings that we had with DEFRA came to a joint statement that was released, and it was really great for TIMCON to be able to publish a statement, and actually it was TIMCON and the UK government stating a joint statement, which is something we're very pleased and proud of. And again, it shows how we have been working as an industry to help all the wood pallet users. The industry's been looking to increase the heat treatment capacities, and that's been done by putting in major new investments in kilning equipment. And I think at this point, that has been problematic. And obviously, as everyone's well aware, we've been all fighting this horrific pandemic, COVID-19, and that has really put an extra strain on the industry. Many of the kiln equipment comes from abroad, from Europe. So engineers were across and starting the installations, and then had to go back to their various countries. So there was a lot of downtime, and this has obviously created a bit more pressure on being ready for come the 1st of January. We've also major pallet manufacturers, and all pallet manufacturers, that have looked at their heat treatment and kiln drying shift patterns. I would suggest that not many of us have been working 24/7. And certainly that makes quite a difference to the capacity moving to that kind of shift levels. The Welsh Government deserve a special mention here as well. They actually set up a grant scheme to encourage heat treatment investment, and delighted to say that, albeit starting from a relatively low base, the scheme has actually almost quadrupled the heat treatment capacity in Wales, which is fantastic. One of the key developments and introductions that we've done from the UK is the introduction of the addendum to the UK wood packaging material marking programme. And this was finally finalised in May 2020. It has taken probably about 18 months to pull together. And basically what this scheme does is really geared at the pallet pools, and I can't stress enough how important they are in everyone's day's life, getting goods, food and drinks to the supermarkets, your medicines, pharmaceutical gears, and what have you. So they were seen to be very, very key to the supply chain. And again, this was backed up with what's happened and what we've all seen during COVID. So basically, very, very simply, and it does sound so simple when we say it now, and you then wonder, you look back on it now and say, well, why on earth did it take us 18 months to get to this? But really the exemption is that the pallet pools now are allowed to use pre-heat treated components to do their pallet repairs. In the UK, since 2002, we made the decision that if any pallet was repaired, the whole pallet would need to be reheat treated and remarked and then put in the system. Clearly, that was going to add to the timescales to get the pallet pools to build their pools stock levels up. And bear in mind, don't forget that the pooling companies are all over Europe. Their pools are going backwards and forwards. So that, you know, the ISPM 15, they were working hard in Europe at the same time to increase the stock and the pool, the whole stock of the compliant pallets. So this has been a major input that's been key. The 18 months was probably taken up because we had to make sure there was complete traceability. Obviously, we didn't want to have any issues with plant pests being spread, etc. So it has taken a bit of time, but I think the Forestry Commission Plant Health guys have just done a cracking job of working with us. And to be fair, the major pools now are working very, very hard to catch up on the lost time that we've had due to COVID and getting into a better position. And then lastly, only last week, we were really delighted to release this temporary easement for ISPM 15 repairs. So the exemption that came out, as I said, was for the pallet pooling companies. This easement came up through discussions with the Forestry Commission, Plant Health, in particular John Morgan of the Plant Health. They picked up on the fact that we were making a lobbying very hard and saying we'd lost 6-8 months due to COVID and getting preparation work and what have you. And in a conversation we had probably about 3-4 weeks ago, it was mooted that possibly we could come up with this easement and that could be put in place until the end of July next year. So basically giving us a sort of 6-month easement and listening, which was fantastic for us because they're listening to what we were saying regarding the lost time and what have you. What is the easement? The easement is basically, it's there for any of our registered sites, registered heat treatment manufacturers in the UK, of which there's well over 1,000 of them. And it now means that if they do a repair, they don't have to reheat treat the whole pallet. They can just use preheated components. How does this make a big change to the industry? Well, if you remember the first slide, we were talking about something like 48 million pallets repaired. If you imagine that 48 million pallets, it would take a huge time if these were all ISPM 15 compliant to get them back into circulation. We don't have the time to do this. So this is where it's going to free up the capacity of the heat treatment chambers, allow them to carry on with heat making new products, ISPM 15 compliant, and the repairs can take care of themselves. How quickly can this now be implemented? Almost immediately. It's just an email from the manufacturers that they're ready and good to go, and that's it. It's as quick as that. So we're really grateful, and that's a real plus for the whole industry on that one. Where are we as a sector just now? The government asked us to do monthly polls to see how ready the industry was getting. And this is the October number, and we were 75% confident, and people that completed the poll, 20% unsure, and only 5% not confident. And we can rest assured we're keeping more, we've got more polls coming, and we're very confident that 75 will increase, and this latest easement is going to make a huge difference. Talk more about Europe now, our European counterparts. Well, I've mentioned FEFBEB. FEFBEB are the European Association, made up of many, I think 28 national associations throughout Europe. Obviously, the UK has been a member for many years through TIMCON. And we were very, very pleased as I say, within weeks of Mr. Cameron making the announcement that the referendum was that we were leaving Europe, Rob Van Hussel made it very clear that TIMCON would always be welcomed as a member of FEFPEB. And I have to say, and I can't stress it enough, that this has been of vital importance, not only during the Brexit discussions we've been having, but going forward, it will also ensure that the industry and ultimately our customers will have visibility and still be able to input on any EU changes that might affect the packaging legislation. Because no matter what happens, because of the way our customers are, and they're now global users of wooden pallets, anything that's been done in Belgium, any decisions that have been made, there will be a knock-on effect to the UK and our customers. FEFPEB have worked hard, they've worked hard together, and they produced a statement regarding Brexit, a position statement. And just an extract from that, I think it's quite important to show this, is that basically in their statement, they picked up on what TIMCON have been doing with the government, the joint position statement, which I mentioned earlier. And I think one of the key things on this was that DEFRA clarifies that it advocates the continuation of a low-risk-based approach to enforcement to wood packaging materials entering the UK after Brexit. And I think the key bit was in the European statement is that they picked up on this and said it's important in everybody's interest that we seek similar clarifications from the National Wooden Pallet and Packaging Associations and plant health authorities across Europe. And that's been massive. And we are having regular discussions with our counterparts in Germany, the HPE, the EPV in the Netherlands, etc. And we're all trying to work together and have been working together in getting ready. Ireland, Dave and Nick mentioned Ireland. Ireland is problematic for users of pallets in the UK exporting and also for people importing. There's different needs to be heat treated, not to be heat treated, and not to go through them, but it's something that people just need to take a bit of time and just make sure that you've got up to speed with everything on Ireland. TIMCON, we're very, very pleased to say that we've had members from both Northern Ireland and the Republic, pallet manufacturers, the major sawmills that I mentioned previously, and also with Quilty, who joined us, I think, 2 years ago. And again, it's great having them on board. So again, there's always going to be, I think the point we're saying here is there's always going to be discussions with each side of the English Channel, both sides of the borders, etc. So we're always going to be sharing that information, and we've certainly seen that as going forward in the years to come. What are the penalties? And again, we're hearing things that there's no penalties, it's low risk, there's not going to be any inspections, etc., etc. Can I say hand on the heart that every pallet's going to be inspected and every ISBN 15 mark's going to be checked? Absolutely not, because clearly there's just not the manpower to do these checks. So it will be low risk, etc. But there are penalties, and it's something that we have to be aware of. And these penalties are with the UK, anyone exporting from the UK will have face the same problems when they're shipping out, as potentially if you're importing, if your pallets are not compliant, you could have a major issue. And I'm not going into all the details, but the bottom line is that there are also financial penalties. There's a link on the presentation. I advise everybody to have a look at that. And what are the penalties? The monetary, if I say anything from £250, which is okay, fair enough, but then it could be up to £250,000. And then you're talking some serious money there. And also you've got the chance where you could get your goods re-exported because they're not compliant. So I think it's something that, it's well worth taking time, and it's been mentioned in the presentations earlier, go through, check, speak to your suppliers of your goods that are coming in, and just stress that they are going to be compliant or there is potential problems. And what should you be doing? And certainly the key thing is do not hold out waiting to see there's going to be an 11th hour change. And the reason I put the 11th hour change in, because when I got the phone call from DEFRA back in August, telling me that the decision had been made, that 1st of January was the deadline, that was it, there wasn't going to be any extensions, etc. I listened to the conversation from Dr. Elspeth Steele, who had led the working group, and we spoke for about 15 minutes, and at the end of it, there was a caveat, of course, John, there could always be an 11th hour change, who knows? And you just go, really? But you know, it's not something you could hang your hat on, and we would certainly not advise anybody to have this wait and see situation. As I mentioned earlier, speak to your wood packaging material supplier as early as you can in the UK. You need to make sure if you're exporting that you're advising your suppliers and giving them plenty of warning to make sure that they've got the capacity and they can cope with your pallets. And early, because remember, you don't want to be sitting with goods that are sitting for ready for export and they're on non-compliant pallets. It means then you're going to have to decant, etc., etc., and there's all costs in there. So you'll look at it as early as you can. Time's running out now. TIMCON certainly advising users to get on board early. Hopefully, everyone's picking up on that. I'm saying hopefully, but in reality, I do know from my own experience with customers that some are just sort of having a light bulb moment, thinking we need to do something, which you just shake your head at. For people who are importing the goods, please talk to your vendors and then get them to speak to their pallet suppliers or packing case manufacturers. The markings, I cannot stress enough about the markings with the ISPM 15 marks. It's not just a case that an inspector can see that there's been a mark, that's okay, let it go. The inspector has to be able to read the information. And legibility has been such a big discussion point in all the discussions we've been having. The GB mark there, that is exactly what they're looking for. You have no problem at all with a pallet if it's marked up like that. If it's a bit blurred in the second, you've no chance. And if it's the last one, the third one there as well, again, that could be rejected by an inspector. So we cannot stress that enough. You need to make sure the mark is clear. The great thing about the ISPM 15 mark is it's a paperless chain, which is good news. That is the good news, but it does need to have a legible mark on it. Please contact the TIMCON Secretariat, Stuart Hex. He has got a wealth of knowledge on this through all the questions that he's been asked over the last 12 months, 18 months. Telephone numbers there. And, again, please, visit the TIMCON website. There are Q&As again regarding pallets and packing cases and what's involved and what have you and what you need to do. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, John. That's excellent presentation there, and I think it's one of the critical points for trade. All trade is going to be travelling on pallets and packaging of some sort. Everybody is going to have to get used to these changes. Can I just? There are a few questions that came up during that, some of which are just clarity, I think, which need hammering home. Will all pallet material need heat treating before coming to the UK? And I think you covered this in your first slide, but just to repeat.
Yeah, all packaging material has to be heat treated. It has to be heat treated. As Nick alluded to, timber, pallet coming from, say, the Baltic states, etc., coming into the UK to be made into wood packaging, doesn't have to be heat treated. But as soon as we make it into a pallet and we send it back, it has to be heat treated ISPM 15 compliant. So yes, everything has to be ISPM 15 compliant.
Okay. And just on that, you said that the UK industry was making, there's a lot more capacity coming and there's a lot of work going on to improve the capacity. What's your understanding or view of what the capacity is elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Europe in the whole is generally in quite a good place, Dave. Certainly the feedback we're getting from Probert you look at the different types of pallet. Obviously, in Europe, there's a lot of use of the EPAL pallets, licensed pallets, and they've actually been heat treated and kiln dried now since January 2010. I think it became the regulation. So in Europe, the pallet pool for EPAL moves. There's a lot more, many more businesses use these pallets. So these pallets have been heat treated. We know they're coming into the UK already. Chemical pallets, as is in the UK, most of the chemical pallets produced are already heat treated as well, so you can take them off. And I think really, as I touched on, I think one of the big areas that's had to really come up to speed pretty quickly has been on the pallet pools.
Yeah.
And they've accepted that. And to be fair to them, they're having to make big investments now to meet the criteria. They're taking a bond. I mean, nobody wants to look at £10 million investments and et cetera, but I kid you not, that's the kind of investments that these guys have been having to put in place. So everyone's working to do it. So I think, yeah, the feedback is Europe are feeling in a good place. We do still get questions, do we really have to, as we've touched on? We go, well, yes, you do. So yeah, it's just constant dialogue, Dave. That's all it is. And communication's been mentioned a few times already this afternoon, and we'd certainly stress that. That's the key.
Yeah, I think that's the message we want to be able to put across between all, whatever category you're in, but the suppliers, importers, end users, the communication has to be moving along that supply chain back and forth all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
John, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much indeed. We will be calling you back in for questions right at the end. So thanks very much, but bear with us. Now, some of the main changes that we've already alluded to in Nick's presentation at the start are we're looking, we're leaving the customs union and the single market. And of course, this changes the way that we evaluate due diligence and risk management within the timber supply chains. Previously, we have been, or up until now, conducting the European timber regulation on all imports of timber into the UK, but that has obviously been in lockstep with everybody else in the EU. Now that has been transposed and is the UK timber regulation. So we have asked, and we're very pleased to be joined by Adrian Hawkes from the UK Competent Authority, who are the overseeing body for this regulation. And Adrian, could you talk us through some of the changes that are coming in from the 1st of January, please, and how they will affect the trade?
I certainly will do. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll just set up the screen and the presentation, so just bear with me for a second. Is that showing up on everyone's screen? Okay.
That's there.
Terrific. Okay, lovely. Thanks very much, David. So as David mentioned, I'm from the Office for Product Safety and Standards. So we're the office responsible for enforcing the timber regulations. And at the moment, obviously, we're enforcing the European timber regulations across the UK. We're the competent, we're authorised to enforce the regulations from the competent authority. So what I want to talk about today is just the obviously the new arrangements. But to start off, I want to go through what the existing obligations are under the European timber regulations, just so that we start off with a clear understanding of what is the current arrangement. And that will help make it a little bit easier to explain what the changes will be and what will stay the same, and so just sort of set the context a little bit more clearly that way. I'll also talk then specifically about what the new arrangements will be, firstly in Great Britain, so Scotland, England and Wales, and secondly what the new arrangements will be in Northern Ireland as well, because there will be slightly different arrangements depending on the area that's being covered. So just to recap, the European timber regulations, currently the purpose of the regulations is to prevent illegally harvested timber being placed on the market. So not all timber products are included within the scope of the regulations. It's just the products that are listed within Annex 1 of the regulation, and they're listed according to Commodity Code. The regulations create obligations for two groups of people. They create obligations for operators on the one hand and traders on the other. An operator is a business that first places the product on the market, whereas a trader is a business that purchases a product that has already been placed on the market. And I'll discuss some of the obligations connected with those two categories in the next slide. There are two instances where a product may fall outside the scope of the timber regulations. So where a flagged license accompanies the import, and this comes as a result of a voluntary partnership agreement between the EU in this case and Indonesia. And that's the only example of a VPA that has flagged licenses attached to it at the moment. The other instance is where the timber or timber product is covered by a CITES permit. And in both these cases, flagged and CITES, the timber is considered to be legal and falls outside the scope of the European timber regulations. So, as I mentioned, the timber regulations create obligations for two categories of business, for operators and traders. Operators have an obligation to exercise due diligence when placing timber or timber products on the market for the first time, and also to maintain and regularly evaluate the due diligence system that's being used. Traders, on the other hand, are required to identify the operators or the traders who have supplied the timber or timber products to them, and where applicable, identify the traders to whom they have supplied the timber in turn. So, as we mentioned, the purpose of the timber regulations is to prevent illegally harvested timber being placed on the market. The main obligation that this creates for operators is to have in place a due diligence system that ensures that the risk of illegally harvested timber being placed on the market is negligible. There are three elements to the due diligence system, and they are, firstly, access to information. So understanding your supply chain, having the documentation to account for the movement of the timber in your product from the point of origin to the point of placing it on the market. Secondly, the risk assessment. So assessing the risk of illegally harvested timber entering your supply chain. And finally, risk mitigation. So where the risk assessment reveals that the risk was not negligible, that you take mitigating actions to reduce that risk of illegally harvested timber being placed in your supply chain to negligible. So turning now to the position following the end of the transition period, so the 1st of January 2021. From the 1st of January, Great Britain, so that's Scotland, England and Wales, will have their own timber regulations, and there'll be the UK timber regulations. Northern Ireland will remain subject to the European timber regulations as set out in the Withdrawal Act and the Northern Ireland Protocol. So there'll be separate arrangements in place for GB and Northern Ireland. I'll talk firstly about the arrangements in GB and then address Northern Ireland later in the presentation. So the two key questions about what will happen following the transition period are obviously who will have obligations under the new timber regulations in GB, so the UKTR, and secondly, what will those obligations be? So to address the first question, who will have obligations under the timber regs, it will continue to be operators and traders. The only difference is that the definition of an operator and a trader will change slightly. So under EUTR, an operator was a business that placed timber on the EU market for the first time, whereas the UK legislation will define an operator as a business that placed the timber on the GB market for the first time. Similarly, a trader will now be someone who purchases timber that has already been placed on the GB market rather than the EU market. So the key change here really is in relation to the market that the timber has been placed on, and whereas the European timber regulations obviously dealt with the EU market, the common market. UK timber regulations are now dealing with the GB market, but otherwise the definition of an operator and a trader remains the same. It's still for an operator who places the product on the market for the first time, and a trader, someone who purchases a product that has already been placed on the market. So the second side of that is obviously having established that the categories remain the same, that you're still dealing with operators and traders, and that they're the two categories of people who have an obligation created by the regulations. The next question is obviously, what are those obligations for operators and traders under UKTR? So to put it very simply, the obligations remain the same as under EUTR. Again, it's just a question of the scope changing from the EU to GB. So operators under UKTR must exercise due diligence when placing products on the GB market. The due diligence itself follows exactly the same format and threshold as the existing due diligence requirements under EUTR. So operators still have to undertake a risk assessment to ensure that the risk of illegally harvested timber entering the supply chain is negligible. Similarly, traders, it's a question of identifying the operator or trader who supplied them with the timber. But the key change is in relation to the in the relevant market, changing from the EU to GB. But the components of having a compliant due diligence system remain exactly the same. So obviously the flip side of this is for businesses, EU businesses importing products from GB. And I won't speak too long on this because this is a matter that will be regulated under EUTR and will be a matter for the relevant competent authorities in the EU member states to regulate. But just to flag that the flip side of what I've explained about products coming into GB will apply in reverse for products going into Europe. So EU businesses importing from Great Britain will become operators under EUTR, and to comply with EUTR, documentation will be required from the GB exporter to verify and assure the legality of the timber which has been harvested in the product. So, as I said earlier, under the timber regulations under EUTR, if a product is accompanied by either a flag license or a CITES permit, it's considered legal under EUTR, and the operator doesn't need to undertake due diligence on that product or on the supply chain for that product. This will remain the case under UKTR. So a voluntary partnership agreement has been agreed between the UK and Indonesia, and that will come into effect at the end of the transition period. This will allow flag licenses to be issued for products being exported from Indonesia to the UK. That said, the agreement is separate from the EU-Indonesia voluntary partnership agreement, and so flag licenses that are issued for export to the UK will only apply to imports that are direct between Indonesia and the UK. If they're issued under the EU-Indonesia agreement and go via the EU, then due diligence will still need to be carried out by the operator in Great Britain who's placing the product on the market here. CITES is different. It's the result of a multilateral agreement, which is not dependent on the UK's membership of the EU, and so trade covered by CITES permits will not be affected by the end of the transition period, and products with the CITES permit will remain outside of scope for the timber regs in the UK. So just to touch on Northern Ireland now. So as I mentioned before, the arrangements for Northern Ireland are different from those in Great Britain, and I'll take some time now just to set out how that is. Northern Ireland will be covered by the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that means that Northern Ireland will continue to be regulated under EUTR. I'll talk through some of what that means in the next slide and what the practical effects of that are. In terms of enforcement, OPSS will still have responsibility for enforcing the regulations in Northern Ireland. So we'll be enforcing UKTR, that's the new regulation in Great Britain, and EUTR in Northern Ireland. So looking at that in practical terms and what that means, there are 4 scenarios that I'll run through in a little bit more detail just to try and illustrate how these new arrangements will work and what the requirements will be. So firstly, looking at timber moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So if a business in Northern Ireland brings in a timber product from Great Britain, the business in Northern Ireland will need to undertake due diligence to ensure that they're able to comply with the due diligence requirements under EUTR. So this modifies the existing position and means that there'll be a new process at the end of the transition period for businesses in Northern Ireland if they're sourcing products from a company in Great Britain. The second scenario is timber moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. So if a business in Great Britain brings in a timber product from Northern Ireland, there won't be any new checks. This gives effect to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which says that there will be no new checks on goods moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. This replicates the position today, and that means that there'll be no change to existing arrangements at the end of the transition period if a business in Great Britain is sourcing a product from a company in Northern Ireland. The third scenario is timber moving from the EU to Great Britain. So if a business in Great Britain imports timber from an EU member state, the business is an operator and they will need to undertake due diligence to comply with the requirements of UKTR. And again, this modifies the existing position and means that there will be a new process for businesses in Great Britain at the end of the transition period. This is, obviously that was a lot of what I covered earlier on in the main part of the presentation. Finally, timber moving from the EU to Northern Ireland. So if a business in Northern Ireland buys timber that has already been placed on the EU market, then that business is a trader, and that replicates the position today and means that there'll be no change to the existing arrangements at the end of the transition period. So just a couple of signposts to resources that are available for keeping up to date on information as we're able to release it. There will be on our website further guidance on the UK timber regulations in due course, and when that is available for publication and is on our website, we'll certainly notify our various networks. Otherwise, we have a LinkedIn group as well, which allows us to communicate a little bit more readily with people in the sector about issues of concern, and a number of other resources there as well. What I'll do is I'll afterwards send a more exhaustive list of links that I think are useful for people to have access to, and which will allow people to keep in touch with developments. And I'll send those around for circulation with the slides after the presentation. But that is all from me, and I'll hand back to David.
Okay, thank you very much, Adrian. I think I mean, you've covered all the key points. It's going to be very important for European suppliers to understand that UK importers will be asking for evidence from them, and I think that's going to be not necessarily challenging, but I think a lot of the European suppliers will be wondering why this is happening. So it's a very clear message we've got to put out there.
Terrific. Yeah, I think and that's I mean, I think all we can really do is articulate what the position is, and certainly if there are any questions about the mechanics of that or how that works, I'm certainly happy to address those. So.
Yeah, no, well, thank you very much. I think you've covered all the key points. We haven't had quite so many questions come up today as we did have yesterday. But would you mind sticking with us until the end of the session?
I'll maybe have to duck out at 3, but Deanne will certainly be here if I'm not here then.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
Very much, David. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we kind of keep moving through and looking at the different regulatory impacts, we've heard from Nick on customs and duty rates, CE marking, plant health, huge issues around trade with Northern Ireland, although I think that this will largely be an issue for UK members rather than EU suppliers, apart from obviously those in Ireland, which is a big supplier into the UK. We've heard about UK timber regulation, the changes to wood packaging, and the issues around ISPM 15. Now we'd like to turn and ask businesses what preparations they're making and how they are coping, particularly from the supply side. So we have two speakers for this session that I'd like to introduce, starting with Mathias Fridholm from Skogsindustrierna, or Swedish Wood, as we like to say. And Mathias is going to talk through some of the issues that have been affecting businesses in Sweden relating to the changes in Brexit, obviously with Sweden being the single biggest suppliers to the UK timber market. So Mathias, over to you. Thank you.
Then I ask you if you see my slides.
Yeah, we've got your slides up now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Yes, so Swedish Wood, for you who doesn't know about it, it's the member organization for Swedish sawmills. And I'm the director there since 1.5 years back. Yeah, I'll try to take a little bit more of a business perspective into this issue and try to give you a little bit of a view of what I hear from my members, what they see as challenges, what they see as possibilities. And at the end of the presentation, I will let you know how many of my members that I've heard that will change their supply strategy or market strategy for supply to UK due to Brexit. So that will be exciting, bear with me. Just short about the UK imports of softwood. Obviously, UK is a big import market, as we all know, and as you mentioned, David, Sweden is the biggest supplier to UK. And UK is actually our biggest export market. So it is very, very important for the Swedish sawmill industry. And as you can see here on a screen all the way back from 1970s, from 1995 and going forward to now, the volumes have been quite stable at about 2.5 million cubic meters per year. I also wanted to show you a slide about the monthly supply, and you might ask yourself, is that of great importance? Well, what I want to show with this slide is that you can see that the monthly deliveries to UK from Sweden is actually quite stable around the green average curve. And if I showed you this graph of many other markets, we would see the orange line going much more up and down depending on market. And this, of course, tells us that a regular supply, first of all, the market is very big. Second of all, we have it's not fluctuating the volumes very much. Which means that it's very important that for my members that they can keep a constant flow of products into UK. And we can only go back to April, May this year, when you all know what happened with COVID, where the deliveries dropped very dramatically. And that, you know, momentarily created very, very big problems. for our mills. But back to Brexit, I think this is probably what my members have been saying for the last 4 years while this discussion has been going on. Well, Brexit, we don't know what it's going to mean, but for sure it's not going to mean that the basic foundation for the trade between Sweden/Europe and UK will stop, because there is still a need and will be a need in the foreseeable future for UK to import sawn timber and timber products. And there will be a need from countries like Sweden with a lot of forests but less population to export. So I think this is a basis for all the discussions that I have had with my members during the last 4 years. But now we know a little bit more, and there are some things we are quite happy about, and there are some things that we are quite worried about. I think that many of my members, they are a bit relieved that finally we get at least a little bit closer to know what will this mean. Because to be a market manager in a Swedish sawmills, uncertainty of what regulations for export there will be to one of our biggest markets, that is certainly not good. So by knowing what we know today and what we will find out in the future, I mean, that's a good foundation for us to make the long-term planning for our market strategies. The second thing that we are happy about is, of course, what has been mentioned now. There are no tariffs for sawn and planed timber products, which is the main export from Sweden to UK. I think the conversation here today would have been completely different if there would have been tariffs for these products. And I also think that we feel some comfort in knowing that Sweden and UK have very strong supply chains and a long history of both customer-supplier relations, but also relation with other entities and people that are working in our supply chain. So these things I would say that we are quite happy about. But there are also some things that we worry about. We saw what happened in April, May here when we got big disturbances in our supply chain, and I think all my members are prepared or preparing for the fact that we will have short to medium term disturbances in the supply chains and maybe mainly the logistics. From Sweden, we have a lot of vessels coming into designated ports in UK. I think that might be easier to handle than those who deliver with trucks, where at least what we hear might be more vulnerable to congestions and so on. We've heard here today that there will be some extra administration around the deliveries to UK, and that is never good. It's an extra cost for my members, but it's not that these. I think during these 4 years we have painted some scenarios that has been a lot worse than what we are talking about today. So even though we see some more challenges, we are confident that we can handle this. We are not exporters only to the European Union. We are exporting to all kind of strange countries in the world outside European Union, which have their own regulations that put, that makes it extra challenging for us from an administration point of view, but we can handle it, no doubt about that. I think the two last points are maybe our biggest worries, and that is what happens in terms of certifications and regulations and standards and so on. in the long run. We have already today talked about the CE marking, that we now have another year. I think this is a point where we are maybe not as prepared as we should be, how this will work in reality. Since the criteria, as we have heard, are the same, at least from the beginning, for the CE marking and the UK CA marking. Hopefully there can be a pragmatic way of solving this in our sawmills. But of course, at some point, these products needs to be separated, and that is worrying. And I mean, I can also see a scenario which I hope will not come true, but that is that you know, over the years that the criteria will start to differ between these markings, and that would certainly not be good for the sawmills. And then, of course, one big question is how the general economy, what effect will Brexit have on the general economy in UK? As you all know, we are very dependent on that. There is trust in the economic system, that there is growth. People feel that they want to invest in their homes, that the construction market is performing good. Those are variables that are essential for us in order to have a healthy UK market to supply to. I'm not sure if I'm the one to give advice about how to prepare. I think most of our members have prepared, at least short term. But anyway, prepare for short-term supply problems. I think everyone needs to create scenarios where you can live with for a time without having your normal business to UK. Look at your supply chain. How strong is it? What contacts do you have? And talk to your supply chain and your customers, and make these scenarios together. And then maybe point 2 and point 3 here, they go together a little bit. We know there will be some problems in the beginning. We also know that all the negotiations are not done, so don't make any premature conclusions. I think you know, after a short while things will settle down a little bit, and we will see what happens. And then I think it's time for my members to sit down and look over their strategy of supply to UK. And follow the future development, because there will be a lot of things that has the potential to be changed in the coming years. And finally, I think we are reasonably well prepared from Sweden. I don't know of any Swedish sawmill that have changed their strategy of UK supply because of Brexit. But of course, it's up to everyone and to make that decision now, then when we are starting to find out what will happen. So that was my short presentation. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Mathias. And it's very good to, it's a good point to end on, to say that, you know, Sweden and the UK, Europe and the UK have been trading for a long time. It's unlikely that's going to stop. You know, there's no way that anything's going to stop there in the timber trade. In terms of the things that have been raised by your members, have they come forward with any sort of big problems that they're foreseeing, apart from logistics, which obviously, you know, is a big issue?
I must say that for the last year or 1.5, it has been surprisingly quiet from my members. We had a lot of questions and discussions about this a couple of years ago. but now it has been quite quiet. Either they are getting tired of discussing this issue, or they feel well prepared.
Yes.
And it's rather the latter one. I think this, with the CE marking and these different standards and certifications that might come up. That is maybe something that they haven't really discussed so much yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, we heard we have another year to where there will be basically no differences, but of course that needs to be sorted out during this year. How will this work in the production with these different certifications? Because for sure, I mean, this creates a lot of internal logistic problems in a sawmill if this needs to be separated from a production point of view. So that's a scenario that I think many would like to avoid.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely, and it will, in my mind, the as you said there, that there will be a lot more negotiations coming. January the 1st, 2021 is not the end point; it's more the start point for a lot of people in a lot of these discussions and changes to business practice and business models. Certainly for European suppliers, we will be looking then at what sort of deal or not we have and what that means for changing the operation of businesses. Certainly changing from CE marking to UK CA marking could cause a lot of problems and could be an expensive change. But I think we'll come back to that during the panel discussion at the end. But thank you very much, Mathias.
Thank you.
I'd like now to our final panel speaker for the day is Mark Probert, the UK director of Binderholz, which is, as we know, an Austrian sawmiller supplying into the UK, supplying all around the world. But Mark's role obviously is in the UK as the UK director. So Mark, if I can hand over to you, if you're with us, you have to unmute yourself. Are you there?
I'm here, David.
Ah, good. Thank you. Good to hear from you. So I'll hand over to you to for an update on changes being made with Binderholz and supplies to the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yep, we've got the slides up.
Okay. So basically, my presentation is not only on the Binderholz Group, but from the Western Timber Trade Association and my members, and basically what I've been hearing on the market. But a little bit about the Binderholz Group first. The Binderholz family business has grown over the recent years, and we currently trade over 1.5 billion euro sales. It grows every year, investing in high-level mass production facilities, innovation and technology, and also new markets. Its most recent purchase of US mills. Brexit, to be honest, has not been high on the agenda for the Binder Group, as it is quite a small market for the business. But although the UK is a small market for a company, it still needs to make the same changes as all other suppliers to the UK, and that will make sales more complicated. It will also have further implications on travel. More time will be needed at airports. We return to more normal times. More details on this subject has obviously have been picked up by Nick Boulton with regards to the deferment account customs codes and declaration. The UK forecast is not as bad as first thought by the IMF, but as we all know, forecasting can be totally wrong. But trading and business is in our hands, and we in the UK must make it work. Obviously, the timber trade has seen positive sales in 2020, unlike hospitality and other market sectors. In the last months, who would have imagined the global need for timber products in a pandemic? And based on our forecast, it will remain so for some time. the UK households spend in excess of £60 billion of their summer on their summer holidays. And this sum of money is penned up in the economy. And we see a lot of this money going into home improvements, and this is why the timber trade has had a successful number of months. Although we can be positive, in the long run, trade with the UK will cause stress and a lot of time and effort. Even in these positive times for timber, we are all working long hours, and Brexit will make work harder. But eventually, streamlining processes over time will reduce this work. I see over the last few weeks, my customers preparing for importing, and this will continue until, of course, the end of December and most probably beyond. In some cases, suppliers to the UK may withdraw from the market because of the extra paperwork and time, but this will be positive for those who remain in the market. Once Brexit has passed, the next thing, of course, will be legislation, as we've already discussed in the earlier presentations. And again, this will cause more stress and time. When it comes to border control, this will be an extremely early problem. But again, we don't see the extent as yet. What we do know is that December volumes into the UK will be busier than January, and we expect trade to resume as normal in the following months. Just remember, we're the fifth biggest economy, and the world will want to trade with the UK. One beneficiary will be the West Coast seaports, as they will be closer to the US shipping lines, which could distribute imports more evenly through the UK from west to east. So basically, we need to be positive about the growth of timber, but remember, the world is also thinking the same thing. And what I mean by that is everyone is looking for sustainable construction, and we see a growth in sustainable construction, even though we have the Grenfell problems and the height and restrictions going in the construction sector. At the end of the day, the only natural resource that can give a natural and sustainable product is timber. So I see timber as a major growth, not only in the UK market, but across the world. And that's what we're seeing. We are seeing an uptake in this need for timber and timber products. So in the UK is a trading nation. We import more than export. This will continue. It will just be more hard work. And that is my short presentation as an importer to the UK. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. There's some good points on there, and I just wanted to, and I think this is a very important point that you've ended on, as did Mathias. Trade is not going to stop. The UK is not going to close its borders. It may make them slightly more difficult to access, but trade will continue. We are a net importer and will remain so. Just in terms of your own company, in terms of Binderholz's activities in the UK, have you had to change your status from importer or agent to operator or anything along those lines?
No, the terms that we're looking at is DAP, but what we're looking to do is what we call DAP plus, which is we will do the import declaration. Okay. We will be using an import agent to do that work.
Right. Okay. So you won't have to go through those. Okay. And your customers are, your company is accepting of the fact that there will be questions coming to you, asking for evidence of due diligence, asking for the paperwork on the UK timber regulation, all of those sorts of considerations?
Not up until about 3 days ago, and then we get a flood of this.
Yeah.
So most probably that is due to your presentation yesterday, especially. And basically, we've had at least 20 emails asking about this situation, which obviously, again, taking me to the point in my presentation, more work. This has now been all passed to the individual sawmills to fill in that paperwork and then resend it. So I can see quite a flurry of paperwork and, again, stress for everyone involved to get this completed before the end of December. And that's a key thing, basically, is the stress this will cause.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there will be, I mean, I think the main thing here that is going to change is the amount of paperwork and the amount of administration and bureaucracy that companies are going to have to go through. So at this point, I would like to just invite all of our speakers, if they could switch their cameras and microphones back on, and see if we have any further questions from the audience for any of our speakers today. Nick's still hiding, but there he is.
Sorry, answering questions.
Yeah, good. Well done. So just, I'm going to stick, there are quite a few questions from supplier countries asking particularly about the due diligence requirements coming through. And people are feeling that if they have done EUTR, they wouldn't have to do further due diligence for the UK. So that's particularly for those shipments of timber that may have come from outside of Europe, hardwood or plywood, lands in Europe first and then is distributed into the UK. So Adrian,
yeah, sure.
So you still have to do due diligence.
Yeah, you do. But if you have, as a company, and the connections within your company, associates and so on, have done that due diligence for the supply chain to the point that it reaches Europe, it's a question of adding on to that and not, sort of necessarily having to redo it. One thing I want to be clear on, though, is that the operator in GB will have responsibility under UKTR to have carried out the due diligence and to have evidence of that. So when we engage with that business, we'll want to see the due diligence system from that operator, and it won't be enough just simply to say that their supplier in the EU did a similar exercise. We want to see evidence that they've got that as well. But depending on their supply chain structure and depending on who they're getting it from, if that due diligence system and that due diligence process has been carried out already and they can transplant that into their own due diligence, then that can work.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, so the paperwork that is collected by your supplier's due diligence, for example, could also be incorporated.
Exactly.
But you would have to demonstrate that.
Exactly. It would be a continuation of that. So you would still need to have the evidence of it, but obviously you don't need to sort of invent the entire supply chain. It's the same supply chain. It's just got a little bit added on as it moves from the European country to Great Britain, and that's what needs to be accounted for in addition to that.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
I'm going to jump around with a few different sorts of questions here because we've covered a lot of ground with the presentations, and I know that people have been on the line now for 2 hours, so we don't want to take up too much time. But when it comes to duties, Mark, Probert, will you be adding 6% duty to your laminated goods? The 6% is added on and paid by the importer, isn't it? So, but you do bring in a lot of laminated goods into the UK?
We bring in, yes, but laminated as in glue laminated, which is no duty involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on the question of duties and tariffs, all of those things, obviously they're on the government websites. They are, I think they're now up on the CEI BOA website and the EOS website, but certainly on the TTF website, we've got the tables of proposed UK tariffs that Nick has put up on our section, and we will be sending that out with all of the presentations from today on Monday. So if people do have questions on those subjects and are looking for clarity, that will all be there. Sorry, yeah, Mark.
Yeah, just a clear point, basically. As an importer and delivering to UK, whatever costs the Brexit will cause will end up at the customer's table. So, for instance, import agents' costs, that will be either charged at the point of delivery, so it'll be a cost on the delivery cost, or it'll be a separate line. But whatever cost or what duties the importers will occur because of Brexit will end up with the customer. Simple as that. And it will cost the UK more money to import.
Yeah, no, and it will likely push up prices. The more work that has to go in, the more costs that are occurred in the supply chain will push up costs at the other end.
Yeah.
Okay. Nick, there were some other ones. I think you may have answered quite a lot of the questions, but a lot of the questions about using customs agents and so on. And I've just reading one that's just come in now. If we are bringing in sawn material into the UK, but the customer is using their own customs agent, are we okay to release the material off the quay, or will we need some form of confirmation?
You should be able to release the goods off the quay because for the first 6 months, there is an allowance to defer some elements of the customs entry. So I think the goods, once they're released by the vessels, will be able to be moved. But I would get confirmation from the customer that they are undertaking and are responsible for the customs entry. I think the UK government has tried to be flexible by giving people more longer periods to make their customs declarations, but that does open the risk of fraud. As I said, I think it's really important that supply chains are abundantly clear about who is going to be responsible. So if you think the buyer, so as a supplier, if you believe the buyer is going to be responsible, you need to write to them and have a clear written piece of paper that says the buyer is responsible for customs entry, VAT and duty, you know, in each circumstance, because otherwise there's a risk that the customer will say, no, it wasn't my responsibility, I thought you were doing it, therefore you're going to have to pay. So I think it will prevent a lot of problems down the line if we're very clear about who's responsible.
Okay, just on a similar question, which I'm going to direct it at yourself, although I think that this is a discussion point for next year. Couldn't UK notified bodies use their offices or sister companies in the European continent to offer CE marking services? UK notified bodies.
Yeah, the UK notified bodies have got sister companies which they are letting that can oversee CE marking. So BM Trada have got a link with a company in the Netherlands, and if you're a manufacturer currently using BM Trada, they can transfer your certification to BM Trada Netherlands, and that will allow you to carry on CE marking and supplying goods to the UK for next year. What they can't do, what those European counterparts can't do, is oversee UK CA marking. There's no facility for that at the moment. Hopefully that will change next year.
Yeah. Likewise, there have been a few questions. I think we've actually covered most of them, John, on talking about heat treatment and pallets. I've just lost the question. Here we are. So, question for John Dye: can companies who heat treat in the UK gain ISPM 15 licenses and then stamp treat their bearers, pallets, etc., and treated bearers and pallets, etc.?
They can, but they would. I'd have to question why they would want to actually do that themselves. Really, you do get a lot of audits and what have you. You know, all the information is available from TIMCON. You can look at that themselves, but in reality, I think there's enough capacity for people to be doing it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hey, David, can I just have a point about, there was a question about whether all wood packaging in the UK needs to be ISPM 15 compliant. And I think I'd be right in saying, John, that only if it crosses the border does it need to be compliant. So there isn't a general requirement. It's only where packaging materials are crossing the border. Is that right, John?
That's correct. You're spot on, Nick. It's only that's getting exported into the EU or America, Australia, anywhere else, because we're no longer part of the EU exemption. But I think a point of note of interest is that what we are finding, and it's kind of taken some of us by surprise, is some major pallet users have decided that they're going to make their whole pallet pool ISPM 15 compliant. And some of the reasons for doing this is they don't have the room to segregate and what have you. And they're also frightened that well, two other things. They could end up loading the product onto the wrong pallet, then have to decant it and put it onto an ISPM 15 pallet so they could ship it abroad. But the other key one was there's so many of these businesses now are using automated packing lines. They're relying on the forklift truck to make sure they lift the right 10 or 15 pallets to go into the magazine. And that then goes automatically. And what people are frightened of, they don't know anything about it until they open up the container doors or the curtain cider when it reaches Europe, and they suddenly realise they've got the wrong pallets. So that's what we're finding. And I must admit, that's always added a bit more strain on the capacity levels because it was completely unexpected, to be honest with you. And again, the easement that we've now got in place, one of the reasons that we helped to try and push that over the line and get it over quickly was really to benefit, you know, people who are using the ISPM 15 in the UK, so we can get them back into circulation very quickly for them as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring Adrian in here on a question that's come up, although I think we may have to sort of say this, it will be a discussion for the future. One about due diligence and the EU TR and the UK TR. And it's a question from Fedicomlegno, the Italian Timber Trade Federation, that really in the future, could we envisage some sort of green lane for European wood products with some kind of mutual recognition between the EU TR and UK TR, because the processes of due diligence and placing on the market and the evidence gathered will be very similar. Could you imagine that? I realise as a civil servant, you can't answer what will happen in the future.
As a civil servant, we don't have an imagination. We at the moment are obviously looking at the current arrangements in terms of future questions around mutual recognition or green lanes or any of those sorts of things. That's something that would be a policy decision by DEFRA and dealt with at the time, but it's not something which we're looking at or that DEFRA's looking at the moment.
So it's not really there in the conversation at the present time.
No.
Okay. No, I think that for the benefit of the person asking the question and for the audience, we can. It's not for us to speculate what might happen. We can only go on what is being said now. It's very, and we often joke about some of the things because there have been a lot of U-turns, there have been a lot of changes from what is initially announced to then what is announced now, and the other changes may come in the future. But we, as a trade federation, as Adrian says, as a department within the government, then we can only go on what they're saying now. And next year things may change. Certainly there are areas which we'll be talking about more in the new year when we've got a bit more clarity in the deal. But there are areas where the TTF will be probably lobbying, because I think that there will be a few areas which have been left undecided or overlooked within all of these negotiations, and in a way they probably won't come out fully until such time as we try to start operating the system that is being brought into place. So at that point we will we will be raising them and bringing them up within European forums as well, within CEI Bois, of which we're a member, and with all of the the members of the other groups. We work obviously very closely with TIMCON and FEFPEB and others. So I'm just going to look at a couple of other questions. I think we've covered off all of the subjects that are being raised. There are a lot of repeats on similar areas, but we did have some questions about Northern Ireland, and we've gone through the issues that are relating to pallets and packaging, due diligence, and CE marking, and the fact that Northern Ireland is going to be in an unusual position. We don't have much time left, but we did get a question right at the start. What do the panel think the effect of the US elections will be on the outcome of that and the operation of that border? Nick, I'll start with you.
I don't know. I don't think there would be. I don't think there would be any impact. I don't think it really makes a lot of difference. I think there's more chance of a deal with Biden, but that's probably about it, I would have thought.
Anyone else willing to make a comment on that question? It had come up a couple of times during the list. I think very diplomatic, Mr. Boulton. And, no, I think the Northern Ireland trading arrangements are something that we've had lots of questions about, and we still have lots of questions, and I think we will just have to see how that arrangement works in practice, and see if it holds up over time. But who knows? This time next week we may have a deal. But in the meantime, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking part today. I'd like to remind everyone, our speakers and the audience, that all of the information that we have produced over the past 4 years is available on our website. It's ttf.co.uk/Brexit and the timber industry. We'll be sending out that link along with the presentations and a recording of this session out to everybody who signed up today and everybody who's taken part, and that will be coming out to you on Monday. And if you have any further questions about anything that was raised today or any of the points that we've discussed, please do get in touch at either with myself or Nick, or by emailing ttf@ttf.co.uk, and we can either forward it to the appropriate speaker or answer it ourselves. In the meantime, thank you all very much. I wish you a very good afternoon, and I look forward to the next round of our Brexit discussions in the new year. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Goodbye all.
Thank you.